Greetings, friends. Prepare for another thrilling journey as we delve into Reddit's most bizarre tales. We're plunging deep into the quirkiest corners of the web. Grab your popcorn and join us on this adventure. Remember to hit subscribe and like. Let's begin. Recently, I noticed that my wife started acting a bit differently. She had become more irritable, especially with the kids. I tried to talk to her about it, showing her my first post, but she suddenly blew up, finding any excuse to insult me. She criticized my appearance, my character, my habits, and even my family. She even brought up the fact that I used to smoke, though I quit over 10 years ago. After that, she locked me out of our bedroom and cried so loudly that it could be heard throughout the house. So when my oldest child came to me, I started putting two and two together and realized she was cheating. Her behavior reminded me of how she acted when she was pregnant with our children, but this time it was even worse. I sought advice from friends and a counselor and learned that her behavior could be related both to hormonal changes and to her projecting guilt because of the affair. I'm no expert in psychology, but it seemed to make sense. I wanted it all to be just a misunderstanding. However, I decided to play it safe and ordered a few hidden cameras, which I set up when she went out for a girls' night. The cameras were connected to the Wi-Fi, and I could monitor the house from any device. At first, I doubted if I was doing the right thing, but I figured if I was wrong, I could just take the cameras down, and no one would ever know. Unfortunately, my worst fears were confirmed within the first week. My wife's lover turned out to be a former colleague whom I remembered well, as they had always seemed close at various events when she was still working. My wife had quit her job years ago to become a full-time mom, and it had been a mutual decision. However, she kept in touch with her former colleagues, and now it had evolved into something more. Her lover was about 10 years younger than her. She had once been his mentor, and they had remained very close. I shared all of this with my sister and showed her the footage from the cameras. She told me she had suspected something for a while. Once, she had seen my wife at a bar with a man who wasn't me, though they were just touching each other's shoulders and lower back. Since my sister wasn't sure at the time, she didn't tell me right away. I also installed a GPS tracker in my wife's car and asked my sister and her husband to follow her. When my wife went out for another supposed girls' night, she actually drove to a different place where she met up with her lover. My sister and her husband filmed him rubbing her belly. After seeing the footage, I knew she had to be pregnant with his child, especially given her moodiness at home. My sister and her husband helped calm me down when I lost control. I wanted to drown my feelings in alcohol, but they wisely convinced me that drinking was the worst thing I could do. I took some time off work, telling my wife that I was going on a business trip. She was strangely excited about it. I had cameras all over the house. After sending the kids to stay with my sister, my wife quickly called her lover, and he came over that evening to spend the night. I won't go into the details of what they did around the house, but on top of that, they spent the entire time making fun of me. They openly discussed their baby and how they needed to come up with a plan before her belly started to show, as it was already over 3 months along and couldn't be passed off as mine. Her lover is of a different race, so it would be obvious from birth that the baby wasn't mine. My wife brushed off his concerns, saying they still had months to figure things out. Then she shamelessly admitted that this wasn't even her first affair. She had slept with another man when she was 29. She told her lover that she was tired of pretending to be the good wife and being around a boring man like me who made her feel old. If it weren't for my financial stability, she said she would have left me long ago. Even her lover asked her about our kids, to which she coldly responded, "He can have them." She didn't even want to be around the kids anymore, as she thought they liked me more, and she was expecting her do-over baby anyway. I almost threw my laptop across the motel room in disgust, but I managed to hold myself back. Instead, I cracked open a 6-pack, had a few beers, grabbed dinner at a nearby diner, and watched a movie. Later that night, I lay in bed for hours just thinking before finally drifting off to sleep. I thought I knew my wife inside and out. I loved her deeply and would have given her everything. But in the end, some people are just rotten to the core, and you don't see their true colors until they decide to show you. That night, I made up my mind. I was going to ruin her in the divorce. Normally, I'm a kind and calm person, but push me far enough, and I can become your worst nightmare. The very next day, I went to a law firm specializing in divorces and asked for their toughest lawyer. I live in an at-fault state, meaning her affair gave me the upper hand the moment I had it caught on camera. The lawyer was a bit hesitant at first, but once I explained my situation and showed him the footage, he smiled wickedly, and we shook hands. He assured me he would get to work immediately, as this was exactly the kind of case divorce lawyers relish. A few weeks later, while I was working from home and the kids were at school, my wife was served with the divorce papers. The sheriff delivered them right into her hands, and I caught everything on the cameras. The moment she read them, she looked terrified and stormed into my office, screaming. But I stayed completely calm. I had already checked out of the marriage emotionally. She tried to pick a fight, but I simply told her I'd made up my mind and wanted her out of the house. After all, I was the only one who'd ever paid into the mortgage. She screamed that I couldn't do this to her and even threatened to tell people I'd beaten her and try to get me fired. I told her to go ahead and lie all she wanted. It wouldn't make a difference. After all, she was already carrying someone else's child. Her eyes went wide, and she asked how much I knew. I just told her I knew enough and repeated that I wanted her gone. She refused, claiming the house was as much hers as it was mine, and locked herself in the bedroom again. I watched her on the bedroom camera having a meltdown, then calling the police. She acted panicked but had a smile on her face the whole time. She was a convincing actress. I would have believed her performance if I didn't know the truth. When the police arrived, I greeted them calmly. My wife came running out, sobbing, and grabbed one of the officers, claiming I was a maniac. I asked one of the other officers if I could show them evidence, and they agreed. My wife looked shocked, as she had no idea I'd been recording everything. I showed the officer the footage of my wife threatening to make false accusations against me, followed by video of her storming into the bedroom and calling the police, lying about what had happened. The cameras caught everything. I handed over a USB drive with all the evidence they needed. Despite all this, my wife continued lying, claiming I'd abused her and that the recordings were illegal. But I pointed out they were perfectly legal as they were recorded by security cameras inside my own home. In the end, it was my wife who was handcuffed and taken away. She wailed that they couldn't do this to her, but didn't resist, knowing it would only make things worse. I sat there, shaking my head. This was the woman I had once loved for so many years. I thought she was kind, smart, and lovable, but I had been completely wrong. As soon as she was taken away, I canceled all her credit cards that were in my name and stopped contributing to our joint bank account. She would have to bail herself out of jail with her own money. She wasn't broke. She had saved plenty over the years while I covered the mortgage. When she came back for her car, I had already packed a few of her suitcases with clothes and left the key on the seat. She wasn't getting back into the house. The next day, her parents came to see me. They had only heard her twisted version of events, and her father was ready to fight me. But when I asked if they knew about her affair or her pregnancy, they looked shocked. I explained everything and showed them the video footage. They were disgusted and couldn't believe that this was their daughter. They apologized to me and promised to stay in touch to help with the kids. Then, right in front of me, they called my wife and confronted her. She tried to lie, but they told her they had seen the recordings. They wanted her out of their house immediately. She tried to backtrack, but her parents told her they didn't raise her to be a selfish, deceitful adulterer who would try to frame her own husband. They disarmed her on the spot and hung up. She tried calling them back, but they ignored her. When her parents returned home, she was gone, but not before destroying several things in their house, which devastated my mother-in-law. Despite everything, I still consider her parents my in-laws. They visit the kids often, but as for my ex, she's dead to all of us. My wife eventually came back with her affair partner, AP, to pack the rest of her belongings. AP wouldn't even step inside the house, and my wife didn't say a single word to me as she gathered her things. She knew the house was filled with cameras, and if she tried anything else, it would only make things worse for her. I wasn't alone either. My sister and brother-in-law were there to keep an eye on the situation. My brother-in-law made sure to keep a close watch on AP from the window. My wife was still packing when the kids came home. She made no effort to speak to them, not even when our youngest cried out for her. Before she left, She took a few of our wedding photos off the wall and smashed them on the floor. I think she was trying to get a reaction out of me, but I didn't give her one. After I remained silent, she took her last bag and walked out the door. After she left, I had to call my elderly mother to come stay with me for a while because I couldn't manage the kids on my own. I couldn't take much time off work, and daycare options were limited. I also decided to order DNA tests for the kids, just to be sure, given what people had been saying. Thankfully, both children are mine, and I also got tested for STS, which came back clean. About a week later, my wife showed up at my door saying she'd agree to a clean divorce if I did the same, meaning she'd get half of everything. I flat out refused. We argued, and she eventually admitted that she had looked into the law and realized that she wouldn't come out on top in our state. We'd lived here our whole lives, gotten married here, and there was no escaping the fact that she would lose unless I agreed to settle. I told her that she had betrayed me, our kids, and her own parents, then slammed the door in her face. She left quietly, and I didn't see her again until we went to court. By the time we were in divorce court, my wife was visibly pregnant, and she had hired a lawyer. AP was nowhere in sight. As expected, she tried to lie to the judge a few times, but I had enough video evidence to debunk her claims. She didn't stand a chance. Instead, she tried to drag out the divorce by refusing to cooperate and making ridiculous demands. She wanted a large chunk of my savings, several personal possessions, and demanded I buy her out of her half of the house, even though she never contributed to the mortgage. On my end, I pushed for full custody of the kids and to have her name removed from the house deed. I had video proof that she had said she no longer cared about the kids and had threatened to make up lies about me. Even though she kept trying to stall and change her demands, the judge didn't let her drag things out for long. In an at-fault state like ours, she was entitled to very little since she was the adulterer. Her attempt to frame me only made her situation worse. In the end, she lost all custody of our children and walked away with just her personal belongings, a modest financial settlement given the circumstances, and the car I had bought her a few years ago. The car title was in my name, but I signed it over as part of the settlement. She never made any effort to connect with the kids during the divorce, so I got full custody, the house, and most importantly, freedom from her. Even before and during the divorce, my ex-wife tried to keep lying about me to others. However, my sister spread the word about her infidelity, and once people learned the truth, all our mutual friends cut her off. She and her AP left town after the divorce was finalized. I heard AP wasn't fired but was transferred somewhere else. I don't know where they went, and frankly, I don't care. They could be freezing in Greenland for all it matters to me. My ex should have had her do-over baby by now, and I hope it was worth it to her. This isn't what I thought I'd be posting on Reddit when I first mentioned my wife doing odd things, like releasing a bunny where a hawk could get it. But reading through the comments made me realize I had ignored a lot of red flags over the years. I guess I was wearing rose-tinted glasses for most of our marriage. But it's all over now. Thanks to anyone who made it through this long post. This is my life now.